Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. It's the 12th of June and our guest today is Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank, coming out to us from Singapore. Now, Vishnu, as always, great to have you on the show.
Always a pleasure to start the week with you, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Now, at the start of the week, Vishnu, what should we be watching out for? Because all eyes are on the Fed, but there are also two other central banks, the ECB and BOJ, that we should be watching out for.
Yeah, you're right. And they're all lined up one after another. So essentially, this entire week would be gauging how hawkish the Fed is, as well as the tone coming out of the ECB and what the BOJ might do. So we quickly start off on Tuesday. You've got US inflation data coming in, which is why parts of the market, whilst the majority is looking for the Fed to pause, about a third of the markets are looking for the Fed to hike because they believe that inflation is going to be elevated, sticky, and the Fed will not pause yet. The majority and the base case, including our own view, is that the Fed will pause at this point of time. But having said that, so the Tuesday will be the first day of their meeting. Second day of their meeting on Wednesday, they make the decision. I think a lot of the communication that comes out of the Fed would be to say that, yes, we paused, but, and this is where it becomes important, you say, hang on, we're not done yet. We are probably going to hike more if necessary. What we are doing now is gauging whether it's necessary, not abandoning any of these tightening buys. I think that would be the very strong communication coming out of the Fed. And how do we get our hints on that? It's because some of the Fed members, quite a few of them actually have said, not enough has been done on inflation. They're still worried inflation is high and sticky. Yes, it's coming down, but their main caveat is it's not coming down fast enough that they get comfort that inflation expectations are contained. So we all recall that the Fed always works on inflation expectations. What makes it tricky is you've also got some soft spots starting to appear in the economy. So there are two things one needs to watch out for in the press conference. One is how much hawkish talk there is around the prospects or at least the options of further hikes. That's one. The second aspect of it, or a subset of the first aspect, is also how long they might want to hold rates higher for longer. But there is also a counterbalance because the big thing that would hold the Fed back from hiking further or even switching gears to cutting is the amount of credit tightening. In other sense, how much lending is constricted in the economy, because this usually would lead to a very quick pullback in the US economy. There may be something said about that. There may not be much elaboration, but to us, this remains the biggest swing factor in deciding how quickly the Fed shifts gear into properly being neutral and then to reverse. So that's what we're watching out for. What would lead to a lot of market volatility is, if you can imagine back to back to back, you get the Fed initially coming out with a pause but saying, hang on, it's not really done yet. And then the ECB hiking 25 basis points and trying to convince markets that they will hike further, despite the fact that you've got some soft data out of the Eurozone. So markets will also be very actively gauging that. So between Wednesday and Thursday, expect a lot of volatility in yields as well as the dollar against the euro. These will be the two biggest moving parts. But once these two move, there'll be big shifts in the other aspects and the other parts of the FX markets as well. And as we slide into Friday, it may also be a fairly active and exciting Friday because the BOJ, whilst it's widely expected to remain on hold, markets think and are edging for it to shift into a less dovish stance. And if they do communicate anything around that, particularly because they are officially reviewing policy, then you can also have a lot of volatility in the yen. Let's bear in mind that the yen has slipped back a lot because of higher yields elsewhere. If the BOJ does create any signals of being or being less dovish, that could see the yen being bought up a bit more. So there can be a lot of volatility around the yen vis-a-vis other currencies, not just the dollar. That's what makes this week really busy. And if I may add one more factor, is China. China is oscillating, in fact, if not violently swinging between disappointment, where economic data are coming out really much softer. So the reopening is really not creating the kind of boost it needs. But then perversely, you can also play it the other way around and say, but then again, because of this, China might infuse far more emphatic stimulus, including for the property market, for consumers. So you can see One day, renminbi is down dramatically, dragging other Asian currencies, and on other days, as the last Friday, because of the hopes of stimulus, renminbi is creating demand for some of the industrial metals as well as Aussie and giving a bit of a lift. So we are in a place where volatility is high, visibility is low. And that two Vs were not meant to demarcate my name either. So that's where we are right now in the markets.
So volatility high, visibility low. We will end on that, Vishnu, on those insights. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.